Hello, it's Jason with another episode of Contrabass Conversations, and we're bringing you something different this week. We're going to be putting out a series of 4 episodes with my colleague here on the podcast and the blog, Trevor Jones. And Trevor has a cool new program that we're talking about today, and it's called the Scholarship Roadmap. You can learn about it at thescholarship.roadmap.com. And I'm just going to read you a bit about the program, and then we're going to dive in about the why and the how and the struggles of trying to find a college. It is a big challenge for sure. So here's a bit about the program from the website. The Scholarship Roadmap is a 4-month online program developed by bassist and educator Trevor Jones. Trevor is the house bassist at the Marriott Theater and was the instructor of double bass and bass guitar at Illinois Wesleyan University School of Music from 2012 through 2020. Trevor developed the Scholarship Roadmap after a decade of guiding students through the music school preparation process. Student musicians who are pursuing a career in music will benefit from the Scholarship Roadmap. The program will assess the students' needs, align them with the right school and teacher, and focus the students' attention on the fundamentals of the music school preparation process. So maybe this fits you to a T, or maybe you know somebody or have somebody in your life that this does. But regardless, I always love learning about how people launch something, what the thought process was, what problem they're trying to solve. And I've actually presented with Trevor on the topic several times over the years. We've done joint presentations. We worked on a college guide for bassists back in 2017. So he's certainly an expert on the topic. And without further ado, let me share this interview with Trevor Jones about the Scholarship Roadmap. We can just start. We'll turn the tables. Woo! Okay. So you and I have presented multiple times over the years on the topic of getting ready for college. I remember it clearly. They've come out in the podcast before, but now you've got the Scholarship Roadmap. So when in the last few months, I'm assuming, when did this idea really start to form?
Yeah, so this idea, I've been thinking about this for years, to be honest. But what's strange about the exercise is that you think about, what am I already doing that I really enjoy that could be something more? And I've always enjoyed the mentorship aspect of teaching. So you see a student, they fall in love with music, and then they start thinking, yeah, this is it for me. I want to do this. I just want to be in music for my career. And then one of my favorite things to do is I just start asking questions, and you start listening. And this happens, of course, over weeks and weeks. And you start to watch the student form concrete ideas about this. And so I thought, man, from where the student and I begin to where they end, say May 1st, when they're ready for college, there is just an incredible transformation that happens during that time. And it's just it's just one of the coolest things to observe. So I'm thinking, how selfishly, how can I experience more of that? And then how can I provide this valuable service to student musicians who are pursuing careers in music? And that was kind of the idea behind the Scholarship Roadmap.
Well, it's such a critical mentorship type of role. I remember back, this is almost 20 years ago at this point, but one of my first students that went off to music school, he asked me during a lesson, hey, where do you think I should apply? And I just named off the top of my head like 4 or 5 schools. And those are the schools he applied to. And I thought, oh my goodness, this one moment shaped the direction of their life. So, I mean, it is a role not to take lightly.
Yeah, it's really crazy. So when, one of the things when you start an endeavor like this, and, with the blog, is you just start writing a lot. You write a lot of copy, and some of it makes it onto a website. Some of it's just simply to kind of get out of your brain and onto at this point, a screen. But, one thing I kept coming back to is that same idea. The schools that my parents are both musicians, or my bass teacher brought up, those ended up being the schools that I looked at. And it was kind of weird because, I think back, I'm like, did I have any agency when it came to this? And, of course I did. If I didn't want to audition at those, my parents wouldn't have, freaked out or anything. But those little explanations, or those little tips, oh, maybe you should, I've heard this program's really great. Yeah, it can set the stage for the rest of your career. So it's like there's a ton of responsibility when it comes to that. And yeah.
And it something I've noticed is anybody who spends any time in the world of music, certainly like jazz or classical music, which is a little more my world. You know your Juilliards, you know your Oberlins, you know your Rice, but there are so many places that are a great fit for somebody, particularly somebody who's maybe interested in music plus something, or someone with a certain type of personality. And that amount of knowledge you accumulate and research you just sort of do, or, oh, this teacher's great, but they're really a good fit for this type of student. I mean, it's so complicated, and there are so many matches that I think a student or their parents wouldn't even be aware would be great out there. That might be a great financial deal. I mean, I definitely have sent many a student off that just paired them with a great financial situation, great bass teacher, great, setting for their other interests. And it's a fascinating and complex art for sure.
Yeah, I also think, one of the things that I try to introduce to my students early in the process is there are going to be mistakes. Like, we may identify a program that really interests you on paper. Like, you may look at the website, and this is so funny, people look at a website, they go, I think I'd like it there. And you go, it's a website. And even if it's a bad website, it might be a really great program. And so you should go to that program. You should contact the teacher, first of all, and establish a connection. That's a super important step to take. It just demonstrates so much about you. It demonstrates that you have self-sufficiency, especially if you are the one that writes the email, not your parents. It demonstrates that you're a go-getter, and frankly, that you just have interest in the program in the first place. And that really stands out to teachers, because that doesn't always happen. After you do that, then of course you should visit the campus if you can. Obviously, that's a little complicated right now. But then you can get an even better sense of what's going on, and you can kind of get that gut reaction to your interaction with the teacher, how you look at the physical campus. And sometimes you do that and you go there and you go, no, this isn't a great fit. And that's actually okay. It was great for you to figure out that that wasn't right, because we can take the lessons that we learn from that potentially negative experience and apply those to future decisions. But yeah, it is complex.
Well, and the whole world is marketing to you. Colleges generally, except for maybe 4 or 5 I can name, like Juilliard and places like this, are in need of students, and even Juilliard in certain areas. So you go to their website, you're not getting enough of the picture. And last time I looked, in the United States alone, there were something like 400 collegiate programs at some level for bass. That's a lot of programs to look at, and every school differs in terms of what they offer in terms of money, or if it's a state school, in-state or out of state, or how that handles. And then there are subtleties sometimes, because everybody kind of needs a bass player, or most schools kind of need a bass player. And so just being able to cut through that it's really hard to do if you're not being guided by somebody that has done it.
Absolutely. And, I think sometimes, at least the way the scholarship roadmap is designed, it's like, the idea is that I am not going to be doing grunt work for you of, contacting professors. And, obviously if you need an introduction, that's different. But there's a lot of work that just needs to be assumed by the student. And if you're not willing to do that work, then that should indicate something to you about yourself. If you're not willing to do that level of work, well, guess what? When you finally get into school and then get out in the professional world, you need to be willing to do that type of legwork. But yeah, there's so many things to consider. Price is paramount, and that just requires researching what's even available. And yeah, I mean, Jason, when you and I put that guide together a couple years ago, I mean, that was one of the, one of the first categories we wanted to figure out. But, that information can be gleaned pretty easily. If it's not on the website, you just call the admissions office and you check in with them and you tell them about your situation. And then this is another place where you can establish a relationship. I mean, I remember when I was moving out to Chicago, I called Ross Beecraft at DePaul, and I established a rapport with him because I just wanted to figure out more about the school. And that ended up really literally paying off in the future.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what you're saying, being a known quantity is so important. Can you just apply and do the audition and get in? Sure, but let me tell you, having been on college faculties before, the seeing somebody that you've worked with maybe a few months before, a year before, maybe even longer than that, and seeing growth, that's such a good indicator. So if you just have one sample, you don't know how they're going to grow as a student, and to see somebody and then 6 to 12 months later see them at a different level, that makes me check the full scholarship or maximum scholarship box.
Yeah, absolutely. It just really demonstrates the student's ability to learn and grow. And that, obviously talent is important. I don't think there's any teacher that's just going to say, no, talent doesn't matter. But the ability to learn and grow and be teachable is also very important. I think for some people might even be a little more important, because you're going to spend a ton of time together over 4 years or however long the program is. And if you're not teachable, that's going to be a tough situation for both parties.
Yeah. So how is this laid out? How's the program laid out?
Yeah, so it's an online program, and there will be one-on-one meetings like once a month, and then there are weekly modules where it's a group setting. And one of the reasons I wanted to design the program like this is when you work in a group setting, there's just a real opportunity to learn from other students. There's an opportunity to be in a community of like-minded people who are all working towards the same thing. And that is incredibly powerful. I think sometimes in the music world, we get very used to like being loners, and especially, in the professional world when we gig and, travel by ourselves and a lot of this, but the power of the group can really move things forward at a faster rate. So yeah, on a practical level, it's weekly modules. Each one will be on a different topic. Potentially like teachers could be 2 weeks. There's so much to consider then. But it's also, I build in some flexibility in the program. So if it's enrolled with students who need more of this, say it's like some general tips on audition prep that can assist the private lessons they're already taking, I will offer that. So it's not like completely set, but I certainly have buckets of topics that are universal for anyone looking to pursue a degree and ultimately a career in music.
So, and folks will be curious about this. So, people generally going to college are going to have a private teacher. So, are you also going to be their private teacher during this week? Or you're functioning in an addition? This is like an additional role. This is taking them through this process.
That's right. Yeah, I don't. Obviously, if someone would like to perform for me, I'm happy to listen to them. But my primary role in this is not to be the private instructor, but it is to take them through basically everything else. The technical aspects of, hey, how do I position myself to get a scholarship? Okay, well, we're in August of your senior year. Right now, you need to be thinking about this. This needs to be done by this date. Do you know how to do a pre-screening recording? Don't record it on portrait mode. There's so many little things like that just frankly, sometimes you just don't have time to deal with all of that in a lesson. So yeah, it's not to replace a primary private teacher. It's in addition to.
There are all these little things that end up tallied together not being little at all. And as I taught, I've taught at several universities. I taught at DePaul University for 7, 8, 8, 9 years, something like that. Listen to auditions. Listen to a lot of hundreds of auditions at DePaul, and it's fascinating how much those little things matter. And now with this weird current world we're in, where we're not probably doing a whole lot of in-person auditions, there's a whole other category of things about presenting yourself digitally. So, and you'd be amazed how things that might not seem like that huge a deal, when especially if you have a few of those things that kind of are off-putting put together. I mean, people might not realize how much power there is in that audition. I mean, at DePaul, we had this form, and there were, I think, 4 boxes. One was no admission. One was admission, no scholarship. One was admission, scholarship. And then one was admission, maximum scholarship. And when you tally that up, okay, if you don't get in, you don't get in. But we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars, well into that. And I was basing a lot of that on the music, but you would have people come in and apologizing before they even started to play, being weird. I mean, just all these things that it's just part of growing up. But you can, part of what you're assessing is, does this person have their act together? And is there somebody that, like we said before, they're going to grow and I'm going to be able to work with? And that's again, these are all, I love that you're doing this, because these are all really kind of hazy but critical things that people need.
That's right. So it's kind of the idea of being a well-rounded candidate. And so it's like if you go in for an interview, for instance, and somebody says, why, like, say, we're going to have an interview with Rob Kassinger coming out, and say Rob asks you, hey, why do you want to study here? And you just mention something that's super general. You don't mention anything that's specific about the program at DePaul, what you know about Rob's teaching, what you want to improve about your own playing. Each of those categories are actually very specific. And when you mention something that's specific in an interview setting, that shows that you're thinking critically about your own education. And that is a quality that a teacher is really going to want. But if you come in there and you're a little flighty and you just answer in very general terms, who do you think the teacher is going to be more apt to work with? And, obviously that's on top of the audition. But, I've heard this from several people that I've talked to. I've conducted a bunch of phone calls and interviews from, heads of, music admissions and other teachers. And a lot of times, they talk about the performance, but they always talk about non-performance ideas too. And one of them is like, this interview process. So, there's just a lot more than going in and playing a really great audition, although that is important too.
Right. For sure. Now, I know a lot of, we'll call them bass moms and bass dads, listen to this. And typically someone going through this process, if they're looking at undergrad, they're still at home with the family in some capacity. So if parents want to follow along in this, like what role might there be for parents if they want to kind of keep informed on what's going on? And I'm thinking like, Suzuki teaching and that sort of thing. The parents have a role through the college. Obviously, many parents are going to be footing the bill for wherever their child's going. Maybe all the bill, likely in a lot of cases. So, what about the parents? How much are of this might they be able to follow along with?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. I don't mind parental involvement at all. What can get a little interesting is when the parent tends to dominate conversations, say, that are in the realm of what do you want your career to look like? That is a question for the student. And there are always the questions about, oh my gosh, like what is my what is my child going to do when they get out of school? And of course, it's a little scary because, as you know, Jason, sometimes we can enter school and then come out feeling pretty differently than when we entered. So in this space right now, student musicians that are in high school looking to go into college to pursue a degree and ultimately a career in music, the best role that a parent can play is a supportive role. And they probably already, have known for years that their child is incredibly passionate about music. So support, if that means traveling to a campus, it's expensive. I know that, but it's really important that they get to see the campus, obviously, if they can. I don't know how things are going to look in a couple months in the fall. Taking them to campuses. And also, this is actually a really good one. Rob and I talked about this. This is a little detail actually, I brought it up in an interview with Rob, but Rob didn't say this, but it was an idea of when you come out of an audition, you don't have to ask right away, hey, how did the audition go? You can just wait, let your kid bring that up on their own volition. And I think that's just another version of being supportive and not being too in it with them. It's fine to push a little bit, but like at this point, if for instance, if you are not practicing, if that's not coming from within, no amount of words are going to convince you to do that. So just try to sit back and steer lightly. And obviously if you have questions, please ask them.
Well, it's super cool, and like I said earlier, you and I have talked about this topic a lot. Trevor and I, a few years ago, worked on this guide to colleges, which was a bafflingly complex thing to look at, but it was a great way to do research. And I can't tell you how many U.S. News and World Report and reaching out to college professors and collecting quotes from students about the schools. So you have done hundreds of hours of research on that alone, not even counting all of your years teaching Illinois Wesleyan University and private students and seeing them through this process. And it's one of those things, like I think back to those first students I had who then went off going to music school. Boy, did I get better advising them as I went along. And people are, take the advice of whoever you're studying with in terms of private teacher for sure, but it's a skill set apart from just teaching people how to play bass well, which I think maybe is obvious to people, but maybe not so obvious.
Yeah, it's actually, so I've been mentoring a student right now. She is a composition major at NEC in Boston. And we were speaking a couple weeks ago, and I was just asking her a bunch of questions. And she just said, "Oh man, this is really holistic." And I said, "Yeah, it is holistic, this whole process. It's not as simple as just saying, play the greatest audition you can possibly can, and everything's going to work out." Again, that is obviously important, but there is a lot more to it than just that. And in my experience, what I have found is that asking a lot of questions of the student and then simply listening is a really important thing to do. I think when we're students, I remember I had some people would tell me, range from, "Why are you going into music?" And of course, my response was always, "Why wouldn't I go into music? I mean, what else would I do? I don't enjoy anything else nearly as much as this. Why would I do something else? That doesn't seem rational to me." And then people, starting down, well, there's no money in music. I go, well, that's also not true. If you do this at this rate, then yeah, there's not a lot of money in music. But if your goal is to go into a profession to make money, yeah, I mean, there are plenty of other positions that you can check out. But yeah, this whole process, it's more, it's just a holistic process. It's more than just a good audition. There are all sorts of life skills that are learned, like reaching out to contact a teacher. Learning how to do that now will serve you in the future over and over and over again. Jason, when I contacted you the first time, whenever it was, like 2008 or 2009, it's like to have the ability to write an email or a text or whatever that doesn't like weird the other person out and then ask them out to hang out, because when we hung out for the first time, I was certainly hitting you up because I needed some information. I'm like, hey, how do I do this? How do I do this? And you were, kind enough to hang out with me. It ended up being hours and hours and hours. And we really made a connection. But if you don't know how to contact someone in the first place, that's never going to happen. So some students, they've never actually reached out to a professional before, and it can be super intimidating. I'm going to email this famous, bass professor, violin professor, whoever. Yeah. And I'm going to help you put that email together. And they might not respond to you, and that's okay too, because that happens all the time out here as well in the professional world. But you need to learn the skill set, because that's how you're going to move your career forward. And there are a million examples of that happen or that occur during the college prep process.
Yeah, and that's another one of those, seems like it wouldn't be as hard as it actually is. And how you portray yourself in an email or however you're contacting someone, it says a lot about who you are, just the complete person. It kind of tells you a little bit about their playing or their thinking or that kind of thing. So it is, and getting people's attention, standing out. Those are all things that they're harder to do than you can imagine. And it's interesting because you and I, music performance was my major bachelor's and master's. Were you straight up music performance, or did you do music education for the undergrad?
I did an undergrad in ed and a master's in performance.
Well, and I think about some of the students. So like music is what we went through as college students, but I look at so many of my more recent college students, and we're looking at bass and engineering, we're looking at music minors, and bass can play a pretty crucial role in scholarships, even if you're not planning on being a straight up music major, double major, even a minor. So are folks like that are thinking, I want music in my life somehow, but maybe not double bass performance? Like, how does that, is this a good fit for them too?
Yeah, sorry, that froze up a little there, but I think I got the totality of your question. So yeah, if you're not necessarily majoring in music, but you still want to play bass, if they have a need for bass players, and then you go in there and play a kick and audition, but you're planning on majoring in biology and minoring in music, guess what? You still may find yourself with a $15,000 scholarship every year just for playing bass. That's it. And that's pretty awesome. You add that in with academic scholarships, other need-based scholarships, and you can find yourself in a much better position. So yeah, it's not just for people who are pursuing careers and trying to win the next opening in the New York Phil. There are opportunities in lots of different situations.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love that you're doing this. It's a great way to be working with people, and the scholarshiproadmap.com is the web address. And then you're up on Facebook, you're up on Instagram, social media, so people can follow along with you there. And definitely go to the scholarshiproadmap.com and sign up for Trevor's email list too. I love following along with that as well. I've been on your list for a bit, and it's great. It's great what you're doing.
Thanks, Jason. And if anyone's interested, I am hosting a free virtual workshop on Saturday, July 18th, and that'll be at 1 p.m. Central, 2 o'clock Eastern, and 11 Pacific. So if you're interested in that is all at the scholarshiproadmap.com.
Beautiful.